Hello everyone and welcome back. I am as always Inquisitor Aura, and this is Lore Around the World. And this week we're going to be taking a look at Tirisfal Glades. On the northern coast of Lordaeron lies the eerie Tirisfal Glades, the kingdom of the Forsaken. These wooded hills are seeped through with the curse of the undead plague, and the sky over Tirisfal is eternally gloomy and tinted a blighted green, and the flora and fauna desperately cling to what little life remains. Tirisfal Glades is a prominent lore-heavy location on Azeroth. Its history, however, extends far, far, far into the past, and while it is known for the torment it suffered at the hands of the Scourge, it is also the birthplace of the human kingdoms, as well as the last known resting place of Keeper Tyr. It is these two things that we'll be focusing on. The first thing it's important to think about and understand when role-playing in Tirisfal Glades is history, of course, and the first part of the history that I'm going to discuss is the birthplace of humanity as we know it today on Azeroth. As we learned in Wrath of the Lich King, the humans of Azeroth are the direct descendants of the Vrykul, very specifically the Dragon Flayer clan of Vrykul that inhabited the Howling Fjord and was ruled by the infamous King Imran. 15,000 years ago, the Curse of Flesh began taking root in Vrykul bodies. The effects weren't immediately apparent, instead resulting in the birth of children who were considered weak and ugly. These children were much, much smaller than a typical Vrykul child would have been, and King Imran demanded that these children be slaughtered to preserve the clan's strength. But many parents refused, instead taking their weaker children and escaping south. This was before the Sundering, when Kalimdor was still the massive proto-continent that existed during the Ordering of Azeroth. And it was there in these deep dark forests that the human race was born. There, those weaker children were allowed to grow and thrive and develop their own culture. They ended up banding together into small warlike tribes, much like the Vrykul used to be in, and battled the trolls before they became the familiar form that they have now. Eventually, these small warlike clans would be brought together into one gigantic human kingdom. This, of course, was known as the Kingdom of Erethdor, and from there, the Kingdom of Erethdor was further broken down in later years into the various human kingdoms that both rose and fell in the centuries to come. Aside from being the birthplace of humanity, something else that's important to understand about Tirisfal Glade is actually the origin of its name. Tirisfal Glades was named for an event that took place thousands upon thousands of years ago, known as the Fall of Tyr. This event was one of the greatest events that took place in this particular wooded glade, the battle between Keeper Tyr and Zakaja Corruptor. After the Ordering of Azeroth had been complete and the Old Gods had been imprisoned by the Titans, of course, moved on to bigger and better things. But they left behind keepers to watch over their creation. One of these keepers was known as Keeper Loken. Loken had somehow become corrupted by the old god Yogg-Saron beneath the halls of Ulduar. And when he was corrupted, the only keepers that were immune to his manipulation, because Keeper Loken proceeded to then take over the entire area, were Keeper Tyr and Keeper Arcadis. They did not fall victims to his schemes and machinations because they sensed ahead of time that something was terribly, terribly wrong with their fellow keeper. Keeper Tyr had been a long-time friend of Loken's. So when something started going wrong with his friend, Tyr suspected fairly early on. He noticed that there was something wrong with Loken, and after a lengthy war with the Vrykul that were loyal to him, the Winterscorn, Tyr decided to steal the Discs of Norgannon. Now, the Discs of Norgannon are an artifact left behind by one of the Titans that records the history of Azeroth as it happens. And Tyr stole this so that he could investigate the extent of Loken's betrayal. He then fled through the storm peaks with Arcadis and Ironia and headed south in order to escape Loken's wrath. If the answer to Loken's corruption was anywhere, it was in the discs, and they would need time to find the cause and formulate a strategy to combat and reverse it. When Loken discovered Tyr's actions, he knew his life was forfeit if Tyr got word to the Titans of what had transpired. So he sent Zakaj the Corruptor and Kithix, both of these creatures known as Sithraxi, who were gifted to him by Yogg-Saron, to hunt them down and retrieve the discs. Tyr gave the discs to Arcadis and Ironia and told them to head south while he held off the Sithraxi. The Sithraxi and Tyr fought for 6 days and 6 nights before Tyr realized that he could not beat them. It was then that he decided to sacrifice his life and unleash all of his remaining power in a blinding explosion that killed Zakaj instantly and wounding Kithix, who fled and never returned. In order to honor this sacrifice, the battleground where he fell was named Tirisfal by Ironia. This translates to Tirisfal in the Vrykul tongue. However, the battle left more than just a name on this glade. Because Keeper Tyr and Zakaj the Corruptor were so powerful, their bodies continued to give off a lot of energy. Keeper Tyr, of course, giving off a lot of light energy, Zakaj the Corruptor giving off a lot of void energy. These energies run rampant across Tirisfal Glades. After the Sundering, when the Highborn were forced to flee from what is now known as Kalimdor, the first place that they landed was in Tirisfal Glades, and they settled there for quite a few number of years. But over time, the High Elves noticed that their members were starting to go mad because of some force that they could not see. They did an extensive amount of investigation on the area, and they never determined the exact nature of what was causing this madness. Eventually, they picked up their camp and continued to head east into Troll territory to set up what eventually became known as Quel'Thalas. But the curse, the madness that had been being bestowed upon them, was a direct result of these conflicting light and shadow energies that permeate Tirisfal Glades even now. Now that we've gotten through all that, let's take a look at some more simpler things you need to keep in mind when you're running events or having guild places in Tirisfal Glades. The first and most obvious of these things is that Tirisfal Glades is Horde territory. Tirisfal Glades is Horde territory. That means if you are Alliance and you are hanging out there, chances are you are going to be harassed by Horde players. Especially if you're on a roleplay PvP server, be prepared for a lot of world PvP in that area. The second biggest thing to note is that their continued presence of the Scarlet Crusade. The Scarlet Crusade is still a thing. They are still a thorn in virtually everybody's side at this point, and Tirisfal Glades and Scarlet Monastery are still their headquarters. Any Forsaken or Horde guilds that happen to have their headquarters in Tirisfal Glades are likely going to have a lot of run-ins with what's left of the Scarlet Crusade, and there are still quite a lot of them, believe it or not. They're mostly just an annoyance to the Forsaken at this point, but it is important to note that while they are human, they are not allied with the Alliance. They are still considered a fringe faction and allied only with themselves. That being said, I have seen several Scarlet guilds. If you run a Scarlet guild, it makes a lot of sense for you to have a lot of your roleplay and your headquarters in Tirisfal Glades. So feel free to go on up there and scout the area out and see if you can't situate yourselves in a nice little area, because that could lead to some really great Scarlet Crusade versus Forsaken Guild role-playing stories, or even Scarlet Crusade versus Alliance role-playing stories. Anything dealing with conflict between the Forsaken and the Scarlet Crusade, Tirisfal Glades is a great background for that sort of thing. Anyways, that is going to be it for me for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you like what you see and you want to see more, don't forget to hit that like button, comment below, and subscribe. Make sure you ring that little bell to stay up to date on my new content. And if you want to donate, make sure you check out my Patreon. The link is in the description below. Thanks again so much for watching. Have a great week, have a great weekend, and I will see you again in Azeroth.